to Robert Smith and to Helen Morgan-Rees. So great to see that you're joining us for this meeting. Michelle, are there any apologies that you've received?
And that was from Councillor Bev Hopkins.
Right, I've had one from Councillor Miles Langston, Councillor Linda Tyler-Lloyd, and also Linda James is going to be late joining us.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any disclosure of personal and prejudicial interests?
Can I just remind, I have a son working for the authority in one of the schools in Swansea.
Okay,
likewise,
so,
but I've had a dispensation letter.
Thanks, Steve, as well. Thank you. Prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Haven't heard of anything. The next item is the letters and minutes. You've all seen copies of the letter that I sent to Councillor Robert Smith and obviously his response. So thanks, Robert, for that. And on the minutes, are there any questions about the minutes at all? If not, can I ask for somebody to propose that they are a true record?
Yeah, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Cyril. And second, a seconder. Oh, someone. There we are. Councillor Mike Day. Great. Thank you very much. We're whipping through the agenda here at the rate of knots, coming to the important bits. Are there any public questions, Michelle?
No public questions today.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is an important part of the meeting, and that is about the new Estin regime. And I know that both Kevin and Kerry have got a presentation, so I don't know which one of you wants to lead on that, and then obviously we'll have the opportunity for questions.
Well, Pran Allenden, thank you very much. We're both going to be speaking about various aspects of the new arrangements, kind of rather the word arrangements rather than regime. It makes us seem, I don't know, less threatening. But I'd like to start, if that's okay, and Kevin's going to share a PowerPoint with us. And there's a kind of a version on this on our website that you can have a look at and disseminate amongst, you know, the rest of your members or whoever you think needs to have a look at it. But this is slightly adapted. Ac yn gyntaf gwrth, diolch yn fawr iawn am ofyn I ni ac yn gwahodd ni I fod yn rhan o'ch gyfarfod chi. Thank you very much for asking us to attend your meeting today to make a presentation about our revised arrangements for inspections of schools and PRUs. And we hope our presentation this morning will answer some of the questions that you've asked us. I'm Kerry Jones. I've worked for Estin for a number of years, well, since 2010. Now I can't really remember what I did before that anymore. And I've recently, for the last year, been given the role as working with Kevin as a link inspector for Swansea local authority. And then my colleague Kevin, he'll be talking about some of the aspects. He's a link inspector with Swansea local authority for 4 years now, and he's a primary school inspector. My speciality is secondary schools and also all age schools, but we're both involved in all age schools and also various aspects of initial teacher education. You've asked us to focus on some specific areas during our presentation, and these are how the new inspection I'm not going to use the word regime, arrangements, will look at the aspects of the new curriculum and how we're going to consider additional learning needs and pupils with those and the reform that schools are being asked to perform at the moment. Also, well-being, you asked us to specifically look at that and give you some idea about how we're going to be looking at that. Another area is pupils educated other than in school. So AOTAS pupils is generally the acronym that we talk about. Also maybe behavior strategies that, you know, and how we're going to be looking at those. We'll come to that a bit later. And then, you know, the challenging pupils and how schools deal with those, and all of these underneath the guise of inspection. Of course, we have to start this with the caveat that we favour no particular methodology. And our stances and our philosophy in terms of inspection is that what we do is we look at how schools do things, of course, and we judge the impact of these by their outcomes, and that's it. We have no preferred methodologies. It's one of the things that people don't really believe about us, and I think that's probably because certain people with an axe to grind or a particular methodology they favour will tell people that they lead, oh, Eston are looking for you to do that, but we're not. So it might be useful for you to know that. Also, you asked us about the regional education bodies and how we're going to be looking at their work. Well, if you can flick on to the next slide, please, Kevin. Thank you. First of all, we recognise that the last year and a half have been really difficult and challenging for learners and their families, as for education providers and their staff. And the rapidly changing situation we all find ourselves in means that throughout the pandemic, what we try to do is provide information about our plans ahead. Our inspection and engagement work during this next academic year, 21-22, will focus on supporting renewal and reform. That's what we intend to do. And as a result of that, we're extending the suspension of our core inspection programme for schools and PRU units to include the autumn term 2021. So we're actually not going to be starting to inspect schools until the spring term, until January. During the autumn term, we'll continue to ask all stakeholders, including you, for your feedback on our new inspection arrangements, and you can do this at any time using our website. We'll consider with the Welsh Government the best balance of engagement and inspection work to support the journey towards the curriculum for Wales. So we're going to be very flexible with this, as we understand the tension that the schools have been under pressure to develop and also maintain their work. From spring 2022, from the spring term that is, we aim to pilot new inspection arrangements in a small number of schools and PRUs. So we're not going to be going in wholeheartedly or as we would have done into a full inspection regime. That's not the way we're going to be doing it. We're going to be piloting our arrangements first of all, so that we can check to see how the arrangements are working in the new climate that we've got, because we understand that the impact of COVID will have been large on learning. So it'll give us a good opportunity to get out there and actually have a look at the details of how pupils' learning has been affected during the pandemic. We're going to ask individual providers for their agreement to be involved in these pilots, but we might still carry out inspections of other schools where they don't agree in exceptional circumstances, if we feel that that needs to happen. The remit work that we're going to be doing this year will look at the local authority and regional consortia support for curriculum reform. And we're also going to be using our engagement visits to gather information on implementation of this and ALN reforms before a thematic report on ALN reform in 22 to 23. Our inspection of local government education services will resume in autumn 21. And we've adapted our guidance to take into account the effect of the pandemic on the work of local authorities, and we've consulted with our key partners on these changes. We will seek feedback after the first inspection and further refine if needed. There surely will be certain tweaks. With regards to your question about the consortia, at present, we don't directly inspect regional consortia. Rather, we look at their work through inspection of local authorities. But this might change. We have a new chief inspector joining us in January, and we'll have to see then the direction of travel that he wants to take Estin in. So maybe your question would be better directed directly towards the new chief HMI then. At present, we don't directly inspect the regional consortia. It's an indirect look at their work during our work with local government. Okay, so Kevin, ti sy'n nesa.
Grêt, diolch yn fawr, Ceri. Diolch I bawb am gwahodd ni I siarad â chi heddi. Many thanks for inviting us to talk to you today. I've met many of you over the years. I can't believe it's 4 years that I've been involved with Swansea. So yeah, I'll have a look really at the background to our new inspection arrangements. Ceri's highlighted there how they've evolved over time. You know, over the past year, we've been directly involved with schools, local authorities, non-maintained settings, PIUs, etc. And that's been really, really useful. And I think I've spoken to some of you, you know, with some of the contact that I've had and Ceri's had probably as well with some schools in Swansea, where it's been enlightening really and humbling to hear some of the stories and how they've gone, you know, above and beyond over the past year to ensure the well-being of not only their pupils but also their staff. So the past years helped us, if you like, to guide our new inspection arrangements, and you know, we've taken feedback from leaders, staff, different stakeholders, governors, councillors over the year really, to find out what really they thought about our arrangement as well. Like all, you know, bodies involved in education over the past year, it's been a tough year, and I heard a local member mentioning this earlier on. Undoubtedly, it's been tough, and it's going to remain tough, you know, when schools start back this term. So we will definitely, you know, have to bear that in mind as we begin to think about reintroducing inspection, as Ceri said, in the spring term on a pilot basis with the agreement of the schools and settings. We've also continued to monitor schools that required either were in statutory monitoring category or also Estin monitoring, and again working with local authorities and advisors on the best course of action in those circumstances. And I know we worked with Swansea to discuss 1 or 2 schools, which again I found was very useful and helpful for the school as well, because it's been quite frustrating for 1 or 2 of the schools that have been in a category for a while and were due to have a visit before the pandemic. So we were pleased really that we can push ahead with that work. You know, the miracles of technology enabled us in most circumstances to monitor settings. We did visit 1 or 2 as well across Wales towards the latter end of the summer. So on to the next slide here. Okay, mae'n rhaid I symud mlaen ydw e? Odi.
Nag yw.
Nadi, that was old. Okay. Okay. This video, again, as Ceri mentioned, is available on our website. It's a simple little video which highlights really our new inspection arrangements. I'm not going to play it because chances are we'll have technical glitches. You can see the pictures, but something, as Max Boyce once said, there's something wrong with the sound. So we won't go there, but I'll just give you sort of a summary, if you like, of what the video contains. You know, and again, what Kerry highlighted is we want you to be assured, really, you know, that we will only visit or inspect the school or setting only when it's appropriate to do so. And that's been, you know, paramount really from the word go. Again, when we do return to the co-inspection work, it will be a revised framework, but again, co-construction has been the key word, liaising with stakeholders throughout the process, and also that is still available for you to have a look on our website, and please take time if you can to comment on it and note any aspects that you're perhaps worried about, or any aspects you think we've omitted from the framework. So when we did consult with various stakeholders, you know, the message really was that it didn't need to change a great deal. So on this occasion, it's been tweaks. I think it's been streamlined. I think it's a better document for schools and for parents to understand as well, because, you know, it's so important that everybody understands what we inspect and why we inspect. So when you have a look on the website, we've now split the framework into two documents. So it's now what we inspect, which contains the nitty-gritty, if you like, of some of the parts that we're going to look at today, but also how we inspect, and that'll include some of the mindset and the methodologies behind our work going forward. So in essence, the principles stays the same. We've still got the 5 areas, and again, we'll take a closer look. We'll take a look at them in their turn during this presentation, and also we'll try and answer some of the questions that you had with regards to, you know, the curriculum for Wales, the well-being behaviour, the ALNet Act, and inspection of groups such as AOTUS as well. Right. On to the next slide. Iawn, Ceri, ti sy hon.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly o fewn ein trefniadau newydd, mae yna 5 maes arolygu fel a fi erioed, wel nid erioed ond ers spel. Under our new arrangements, there are still 5 inspection areas, and they're pretty much the same. You'll be familiar with them, I'm sure. The first one has been renamed Learning. It was always called Standards, and Standards never really gave the general population an idea of what we meant, and what we meant was learning. So actually, that's what we've renamed it. We've renamed it Learning. People that often confuse standards with some kind of numerical target or attainment that pupils would make in certain exams and things like that. But over the last couple of years, the exam system has been quite different from how it has been before, and therefore the results are not comparable. So we're not going to be using any exam outcomes at all to inform our judgments on learning. But of course, we'll have, you know, dialogue with the school on how they reach their judgments, GCSEs and A-level, but that will be part of it. But it's not going to be taken into consideration in that kind of numerical way that did used to happen a little bit before, although we've always taken a vast swathe of our information from what we see in the classroom, what we see in pupils' books, and what we can elicit from speaking to pupils about their learning. But it's learning. That's what we're going to be looking at. Well-being, attitudes to learning is the same. Teaching and learning experiences is the same. That includes, of course, developments of the new curriculum, which Kevin will talk about a bit later. Care, support and guidance, again, the same title as it was. And leadership and management, the same. Now, you asked specifically, os gallai di fynd i'r sleid newydd, diolch yn fawr iawn, about ALN pupils. And of course, as you know, there is a new code, and the most recent pronouncement from the government is that it's their expectation that any sector uses the period between September and January this academic term to reflect on the guidance and begin preparatory work for the new ALN system. So we'll be working with schools on our engagement visits to see how they're doing this, but we won't expect Rome to be built in a day here. And really the most important thing for us are the outcomes. And if you have a look at the inspection guidance that we've produced this year, we've specified, I think, more clearly than we've ever done so before, how we're going to be expecting outcomes for ALN pupils. And it's to do mainly with progress that these pupils make in relation to their individual targets and various starting points. You're never going to know this before you go into a school, and there's no particular data, external data anyway, that's going to help you particularly with this, although we will be speaking with schools about internal data that they keep on pupils and how they arrive at those targets and whether they are challenging enough. We're going to be evaluating the extent to which pupils develop their physical skills, their fine motor skills, mobility, independent living skills, their social skills, as well as their academic skills, the skills that will provide them with a firm basis for their future life. And we'll be having a look at different kinds of additional needs and how well schools and providers in general help these pupils learn alongside other pupils. Os gallai di symud mlaen, os gwelwch yn dda, Kevin. If you're reading the guidance on well-being, what you'll see is very little change. The guidance for the present inspection arrangements are very similar to those that have been in force since 2008. Inspectors should consider the extent to which all pupils, including those with additional needs, this is the bit that's different, are ready to take on leadership roles and responsibility. So you mentioned ALN pupils. Well, that's one of the areas in which we've strengthened our work. We've strengthened our work in terms of looking at their learning and specified that a little bit more clearly in our guidance, and then we've mentioned them also in this aspect. So those are the new changes. In terms of, again, data around attendance, that's not going to be useful at all, and we're not going to be looking at any tabulated lists of attendance or averages of attendance and how schools compare with one another, but we will be having a look at how schools are encouraging pupils to come back to school and stay in school and learn in school, and if they can't do that, how they provide for them virtually. There's mention about pupils with ALN, as there's always been in Inspection Area 4, which is care, support and guidance, and specifically we're talking about tracking progress of pupils with ALN from their individual starting points, of course having a discussion with various staff members, including the Elenco, on how they arrived at these targets and how they're tracking them. Also, how the school can provide assurance that pupils educated off-site receive appropriate support, how they quality control that work, and that could happen in a number of different ways. And how partnerships with other schools or agencies are used to support those who might need additional help. In terms of AOTAS, I think, Kevin, you want to say a little bit about that, and then I can mention a little bit about secondary schools and AOTAS, which is where the main focus has been.
Great, yeah, diolch, Kerry. Yeah, it's just to clarify, really. I think you mentioned earlier on we use the acronym AOTUS, but we use it to describe, any statutory education provision that happens outside a maintained primary, secondary, or special school, and which is organised and paid for by the local authority rather than the school. Typically, this includes PRUs, home tuition, independent schools, further education colleges, work-based learning providers as examples where they may be used as an alternative provider. Now, in our guidance, we do actually make reference to this group, and it's in 4.1. So when evaluating the provision of learning support, inspectors should consider how well the school or PRU provides assurances that pupils educated off-site or on-site receive appropriate support, and also how well they use partnerships with other schools or agencies to provide effective support. Now, it could also, and Helen, we've had lots of conversations around AOTUS over the years. It will obviously, form part of a local government education services inspection if, we feel that it needs to be possibly in inspection area 2, which is the local question, if there is a particular need to discuss it further. But it forms part of our ongoing discussions, if you like, with the local authority.
Yeah.
Diolch, Kerry.
No, diolch, Kevin. Just with regards to secondary schools, this is where we've seen a burgeoning use of AOTUS over the last 4 or 5 years, and we wrote a report on it a couple of years ago about registration practices. It wasn't the most catchy title of any thematic report we've produced, but I think it was an important report. And within that, I think what we did was reflected the variation across Wales in how different schools in different local authorities rely on, I don't quite know what the word is, on this practice, the practice of removing pupils from a school and giving them to somebody else to educate, which is what we're talking about, really. In secondary schools, we track this closely, and we have done so for the last 6 or 7 years, 7 years now, I think, when we noticed this as a burgeoning trend in some particular local authorities. It has an impact, and it has an impact on those pupils directly, because we can't really guarantee how well those pupils are being looked after. So it's one of the questions, such as Kevin mentioned, that we will be looking at with local authorities. But we'll also be looking at why schools are doing it in the first place, what the decisions are, what the rationale for the decisions are, and whether they've evaluated the outcomes of doing that, on the impact of doing that on those pupils, because they were those schools' responsibilities before they decided they weren't. So those are the things that we look at specifically in secondary schools. Okay, nôl I ti, Kevin.
Diolch, Kerry. I'm very conscious of time because, Michelle, I think it was 20 minutes we went to, and my clock is showing 22 already.
Oh,
so I will move on a little bit. So inspection area 3, I'll focus mainly here, really. The 2 areas are 3.1, the breadth, the balance and appropriateness of the school's curriculum, and 3.2, which is the teaching and assessment. So in 3.1, of course, this is one of the questions you asked about the new curriculum, really, isn't it? And we've got to be mindful, really, of the challenges the school have faced over the past year, where many had started on their journey, to 2022. And of course, the pandemic has hampered and hindered in many cases. In some cases, schools have managed to plough on and use the time to plan. But of course, the situation will vary across local authority, within a local authority and across local authorities as well. So we've got to be mindful of that. But, we make it clear in our new inspection arrangements that inspectors should approach the evaluation of providers' curriculum in a flexible and positive way. Coming back to that word regime, hopefully when we begin inspection again, we need to look at where schools are with a new curriculum. The Welsh government's document, the Journey to 22, is a good guidance document for schools to follow, and it's useful for inspectors as well to begin to understand where schools are along that journey. And Kerry, I quote you, Rome wasn't built in the day. So again, we've got to be mindful of that. We will be interested to see how the school's curriculum aligns with their vision, and do they know where they're going in light of that. And again, the Journey to 2022 is a good guidance document to help them. And this is the feedback we've had, over the yearly from schools. We have no preference for any particular curriculum model, as Kerry mentioned earlier. Again, the curriculum has to, and learning experiences have to be stimulating and challenging to a full range of pupils, and that schools support them in the best way they can. We'll also, and I'm pleased to see this, as I'm also a lead inspector for non-maintained settings, which is the sort of preschool, if you like, which Swansea and Northampton Talbot are the only two authorities that have their early years within their schools. Other local authorities have them externally. But I'm pleased to see that we will be evaluating the use of the outdoors. And that's specifically mentioned there. We'll also evaluate the nature and extent of learning outside the classroom that links directly to the planned curriculum. Now, these could be outdoor areas, it could be visits, and how well the school enriches the curriculum through additional activities. Again, we have to be mindful of the challenges schools have faced over the year, and we're not sure if schools, even this year, will be able to offer that full range of rich experiences that they can normally through field trips in secondary school, as an example. But it's there in the curriculum. So the message there really is that we take each school and setting, on its merits, see where they are on the journey, what sort of impact the curriculum is having, is it providing an enriched opportunities and learning experiences. But again, we will bear in mind the challenges they've had, and also, see that it's really reflected in the school's vision and ethos. I think that's important. And we link that later on to inspection area 5, which is the leadership. Briefly, because I am conscious of time, 3.2 teaching and assessment. Again, no preferred methodology that teachers should follow. But again, we will be having dialogue with leaders and staff really as to their developments in teaching and learning. It's clear in the curriculum, the pedagogical approaches to improve learning. So again, it'll form part of the discussion. And more importantly, what we are looking for is to make sure that consideration is whether the classroom practice is successful, engaging all pupils and developing their skills, knowledge and understanding to an appropriate high level as they move through the school. Right. My last slide here. And again, just to tie up with the quality of and effectiveness of leaders and managers, and I'll just pick up some of the main points or the main changes, if you like. We want to make sure that school leaders communicate vision well, and again, this links back to the curriculum and the way they're heading. We also want to evaluate how well schools promote a culture, a safeguarding culture, and also effectiveness of leadership, including actively promoting staff well-being. And again, this has been the strength of many schools over the pandemic, is to ensure that, you know, that they look after their teachers. And it's also been a strength of local authorities as well, to make sure that their head teachers and teachers are supported accordingly. We'll also evaluate how effective leaders and managers are in addressing national and local priorities. So again, you know, the curriculum obviously forms part of this, as will the ALNet Act. But again, we will evaluate where they are on that journey. And also there is an increased importance given to developing pupils' Welsh language skills in formal and informal situation. And again, I know the local authority will be producing a strategic plan to develop Welsh language, which will be presented to Welsh Government, I think, in the new year. So again, it's something important for you as local authority to begin to have the conversation, not only developing Welsh language in Welsh medium schools, but also developing Welsh language skills in English medium schools as well. So that's there in the new framework. And also, more importantly than ever, really, you know, how well leaders develop, again, an ethos and a shared mentality, working with parents, ensuring that they have the correct support and help required to develop their children's skills as well. And again, we've seen fantastic examples over the course of the pandemic where schools have gone above and beyond to support pupils and families. Self-evaluation 5.2, thank goodness the emphasis, mae'r pwyslais trwy hyn ar y gwneud, ar dim y gwaith papur. So the emphasis on this occasion, thankfully, is on the effectiveness and the impact of the school evaluation, and not on, you know, driving paperwork for the sake of it. So again, we'll want to know how effective the leaders and managers know how good they are and which areas they need to improve. And also a big part of 5.3, tying in with the new curriculum and what's going on over the past year, is professional development and the emphasis and the appropriateness of developing staff. Kerry.
Okay, y newidiadau ola dyn ni moyn sôn amdanynt. The last changes that we'd like to speak about are overarching changes. And what we'd like to see is our inspection reports being even more useful to schools and PRUs than they've always been. And what we're trying to do is ensure that the text is a rich narrative describing the school's strengths and areas for improvement, if there are any. To help us do this, we've removed summative judgments. So for any particular section, any particular inspection area, there's no longer a specific judgment for this. Only the key strengths and areas for improvement will be reported. I don't know if Mike's got a question there.
Sorry, I'm happy to wait until the end.
Okay.
It would be great, Mike. Thanks. If you can just hold up, we've just got 2 slides to finish off, and we'll come straight to you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Questions afterwards, yeah.
And then there is a change to the notice period that schools get. Oh, sorry, yeah. If you can go back, Kevin, sorry, one slide. There's no changes to the follow-up procedures. I think it's the next one on, Kev.
Yeah, I can't see it for some reason. It was there this morning. There we are.
Okay, there you go. There's no changes to follow-up procedures, so SM monitoring will still be there. Significant improvement as a statutory category, and special measures will also be there. The follow-up will be the same as it's always been, and we want to disseminate, you know, good and effective practice as part of that. Okay, os gallwn ni symud ymlaen, Kev.
Yeah, I'll just finish off with these two then, because I know time is running away with us. So, you know, we really haven't changed the way we approach inspection. You know, we firmly believe that, making inspection a positive experience, as best we can. We've got inspection mindset, which helps us to ensure that it's the best for learners, and that inspection offers leaders, teachers and support staff a chance to speak professionally and constructively when we are out on inspection. And also, it's important that we take the opportunity to share what we've seen from across Wales to support the development of schools as well. So our mindset, we want to be fair and impartial. We want to be supportive. We want to be reflective, and also to be transparent as well. So that's the mindset. Again, you find more information on that on our website. And the last slide here, again, our principles. Like every teacher, like every supporter, we've all been teachers, as inspectors. We know what it's like. But, at the end of the day, learners matters most to all of us that are involved in education. We've developed this group of principles that you can see on the screen. Again, you can take time to have a look at it when we send the PowerPoint out to you. But hopefully, it'll set people's minds at ease a bit, because there are often misconceptions, when you hear the word inspectorate or Estyn are coming to inspect, we are there for the benefit of learners, but we want it to be, a supportive experience and part of professional development to help the school move forward. Okay, I am going to end there. Michelle, sorry we've overrun, but so questions, yeah, we'll try do our best to answer them. If we haven't got any answers, or we need to go back and check because so many things have changed, we will get back to you. And Michelle, perhaps you can email any questions that we haven't been able to answer today because of time and everything. Lyndon, over to you. Sorry.
Great, thank you, Kerry and Kevin. Thank you very much. And can I say that during the pandemic, we were particularly proud of the teachers throughout Swansea. They certainly were learning on the hoof as well, because we all had to learn new skills. And I certainly, on behalf of the committee, wrote out to them to thank them, to show that they were in fact valued by us all. So questions, Mike, if you'd like to come in.
Yeah, thanks ever so much, Kerry and Kevin, and really interesting. I, for one, don't mind you having overrun, because I think it's important for us to be kind of updated in what's going on, and particularly in the current circumstances that we've been experiencing over the last 18 months or so. And I think we're all fully aware of that. It's been good and refreshing to hear that Estyn themselves have been reviewing actions and its own approach to inspection. And I think there are opportunities for us to be able to look at ways forward. I suppose I just wanted to kind of check a couple of things, if I may. And one is, I think of something that Kevin mentioned towards the end of the presentation, which I was delighted to hear, is that balance between identifying areas for improvement and driving improvement in performance. And I note that you've said about identifying areas for improvement. Do you go the next step, as it were, and talk about what recommendations you might have for ways in which that improvement might be achieved, or do you leave it up to the individual schools and local authorities to determine that themselves? So that's one question I have. The second then was, as far as the 5 areas of that you cover are concerned, are they all equally weighted? Because having been cabinet member for education for 8 years and subject to a number of inspections, I do recall that the 2 key elements were teaching and learning and leadership and management, and wondered whether there is any change to the emphasis or weighting on each of those 5 areas, or whether they're equally weighted. And the last point was fairly specific, was anecdotally, I think we've heard of more parents wanting to homeschool, and I just wondered what challenges that presents for you as an inspection body. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Kerry, if I answer the first one,
Yeah,
you can answer the second part, because you've been in on the I&V group who've been formulating the new framework, and we'll chip in with the last one, really.
Sure.
But yeah, coming back to Mike, your point there, I think it's refreshing, really, and it's something that's been we've been working on for a while now, in recognizing that schools' self-evaluations have been getting longer and longer and longer. And as a head myself, I know how, how wondrous it can be sometimes, especially, when I was a head of a small school, to have to produce this. What we are looking for now really is to have that dialogue with leaders and staff as well, really, to gather their understanding of where they're at and where they are going. Hopefully, Mike, the school will have recognized really how strong, where their strengths are and where their areas to develop, and again, with the work with the local authorities, we ask for a report prior to inspection. And more often than not, there is correlation between what we see, what the school sees, and also what the local authorities sees. So again, as far as us advising, it may form part of the recommendation that we will leave a school or setting, should we feel that it is an area that they really need to work on. Or also, it could form part of the narrative of the report, where we'll highlight areas in other inspection areas, not just inspection area 5, where they could see improvement. But often or not, I think it's the dialogue that's important as well. And then there will be many things that we will have discussed with the leaders during the week that won't make it to the end report. But again, that's where the process is part of the professional development as well, that we can bounce things off. And what's nice as well, I think, with the new inspection framework is that we can adapt it, and look at the school's own circumstances, and try and work with leaders to find out, there's pointless us coming in and say, well, you're more able and talented, they're compared to the school down the road, they're nothing. We've got to take each school really separately, and the challenges one school will not be present at the other school. So I hope that answers that first part of the question for you. Kerry, do you mind?
Yeah, I think, Mike, you were also asking whether we were directive in our recommendations, as in we were going to suggest the mechanisms by which improvement could be brought about. Well, we don't do that. What we do is we look at the things that need to be improved, and we try and prioritize them, really, so that they're distilled to no more than 5 recommendations, although sometimes it might not be enough in extremis. And it's up to the school and working with the local authority and the regional consortia as to how they do this. We do, however, get together with schools if necessary afterwards, and schools in particularly statutory follow-up categories, and look at their plans carefully to see if those plans are functional and if they have the capacity to bring about improvement. So yeah, we say what needs to be improved, and we work with the schools afterwards on a plan if necessary. In terms of your second question, the second question was the one about weighting. There's no particular weighting in it, although when you think about a list, the most important one comes first, which is the learning. So it's the learning that we're most concerned with, and if everything else is right in a school, then the learning should happen. So that's it, really. There's no particular weighting. And then what was the final question?
It was
Mike?
a connection with the challenges that homeschooling presents in terms of instruction. Yeah.
Well, once pupils have kind of gone off the radar, we can't do anything about that. There's nothing we can do about it at the moment.
Yeah,
So
the
it does
dialogue we will, sorry Kerry, and Helen and I, we've had conversations, from a local authority's perspective as to how they then support these pupils that are homeschooled. So yeah, it's still on our radar. It's still part of the dialogue with local authorities, but not as far as Estyn inspecting the provision directly then.
Thank you. Lyndon, would you allow me just one brief comment? And that's that
Certainly,
I think,
certainly, Mike. Yeah.
I think the presentation today has demonstrated the importance of everybody within the school community being aware of inspection arrangements, and I'm sure that staff and leaders in particular would be aware of those. But I suppose just a comment for Helen, that I do feel that we need to ensure that governors are also brought up to speed with the changes, and I think as governors we all have that role, which to an extent Estyn operates on, and the principle of being a critical friend, making sure we got the balance right between the critical element and the friend element. But I think it would be important for us in some way to be able to disseminate what you've shared with us today amongst governors. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mike. Helen's got a hand up. Helen.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Just to respond to Councillor Day, just to say, obviously, both Kevin and Kerry as local authority link inspectors are in regular dialogue, really, and have shared a lot of information very quickly on request. So what we tend to do then is to share the relevant information in our newsletter, either to schools or our newsletter to governors. So if we haven't done it already, we'll make sure that the information available on Estyn's website is highlighted and spotlighted to governors and staff in schools alike, particularly as there's an opportunity this term to continue to feed back into that engagement with stakeholders.
Great, thank you very much, Helen. Any other questions from anyone? Not that I can see, so therefore could I thank both Kevin and Kerry for the presentations, and we look forward to that going out to governors as well as obviously the schools, as Helen has mentioned, and thank you very much for bringing us up to date.
Croeso.
Diolch yn fawr, thanks very much, Lyndon. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd, braf I weld chi bawb. Hwyl.
Yeah, great. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi. Dabo.
Right.
Well,
Right, for the next item on the agenda is an update on education COVID recovery as we move into the new school year. And could I call on Robert or Helen, whoever wants to go first or is going to lead on that one?
Well, I think, Chair, it's best for Helen to lead on this, because she's done an immense amount of work, as have all the education staff over the summer, to support our schools. I don't need to tell you, that this has got to be a partnership, taking on board Welsh Government guidance, taking on our role and the school's own responsibilities. So I think we are working with others and I'm trying to bring people with us on this, and I think that's reflected in the presentation that Helen is going to give you. So it's over to you, Helen.
Great, thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yes, I've got a verbal update for you today, because a lot of the situation is fluid, as you can imagine. Obviously, we've had Welsh Government guidance through the course of August, and the most recent guidance appeared last Friday. So we are in a position to offer you as panel members a synopsis really of the main changes, what's different as we enter a new academic year and pupils return to our schools tomorrow. So I'll give you just a brief overview. In terms of where we are, there is a clear imperative that we try and normalise schools as much as possible and return to a state of business as usual as far as possible. So as Wales is in alert level 0, the current policy means that any contacts of confirmed COVID cases are exempt from isolation if they do not have symptoms of COVID and have been double vaccinated and are also under the age of 18. So what that actually means for our schools is potentially good news. in the sense that we will not have to self-isolate whole year groups in secondary schools and bubbles of classes within primary schools. That will not be happening in the new academic year, so that's a major change. In terms of the other key points going forward, if you do obviously have symptoms of COVID and you have a positive test as a pupil in a Swansea school or a staff member, you must isolate immediately. So there's a huge responsibility really in terms of working with our parents and carers in Swansea to ensure that they understand their responsibilities. As Councillor Smith said, this is very much a partnership to get this right, to keep education going in Swansea. One other major change, particularly affecting our secondary schools, is that there is no longer a requirement to wear face masks or face coverings. So in a class, there is no requirement to do so. However, if a pupil feels that they would still like to wear a face mask, of course, that would be permitted. We will maintain for secondary pupils the wearing of face coverings on school transport. Further to that, as I said, the contact bubbles in all our primary schools will disappear, and the year groups in secondary schools is absolutely useful because, as you know, a year group can be anything in our Swansea schools from 150 to 450 potentially in a whole sixth form, for example. So the isolation of a large number of pupils will discontinue. Another change is that we have been working under relaxed duties where there was flexibility for schools to stagger the start times and the finish times in schools. This will now come to an end. So schools will return to their normal times. So they will operate the normal start and finish times that they had before COVID and that first lockdown. We will be maintaining the cleaning of high touch areas and those areas that are well used in our classrooms and in corridors and in and around the school. So that high kind of cleaning regime will be in place at least until Christmas throughout this autumn term. So all staff and secondary pupils are encouraged to take those LFT tests twice a week and to report those results really to the online portal. So that is in keeping with what was happening last term. There is a new change in terms of the operational guidance that schools have become used to, which has been produced at a national level and then considered again here in Swansea at a local level. There will be a change from the 20th of September, so a fortnight on Monday. There's an expectation that we adopt a new national framework and that we will support our schools to get to grips really with this new framework, because after the 20th of September, the operational guidance will cease and this new framework will kick in. So we are going to meet with all head teachers in Swansea on Monday. So we have a fortnight really lead-in time to understand the ramifications of that new framework. And we're still working on it ourselves to distill the main messages out of that. And we saw that for the first time on Friday. So when we will have any new documentation, obviously we always share that at the earliest opportunity. And our key desire is to allow school leaders to have planning time to implement these changes. So we don't expect schools to start with too many differences tomorrow. We expect them to carry on much as they were largely last term, but obviously to adapt certain changes like the non-wearing of face coverings in secondary. But we're giving them a fortnight's grace really to fully implement the new framework. So as before, our environmental health officers in TTP, Test, Trace and Protect, will be responsible for contacting each positive case, and they will be the ones who collect information on close contacts, and they will be the ones giving us the advice really on who else needs to isolate where relevant. So schools will still need to maintain some kind of record if they have a positive case of the pupil and TTP colleagues then will draw upon the information provided from the school to help make decisions. So part of the decisions of what you do if you're a school teacher or a school leader and you have a positive case that either presents itself on the morning in a school or during the course of the day, then we have produced in Swansea, as part of our departmental support to our schools, we've produced a decision-making tree to help them, and of course we'll update that in light of any new changes that we've received recently. So because there's been a comprehensive review by the Chief Medical Officer in Wales, it's considered that children and young people are no longer clinically extremely vulnerable, and with respect to that, they are going to be removed from the list of shielding patients in Wales. However, there will be a small number of pupils who still receive specialist clinical advice on particular illnesses. But to all intents and purposes, children will be removed from the shielding list. We are still awaiting more information from Welsh Government about the recent announcement on air quality and measures to be taken around that. The current advice is that ventilation is recommended in all classrooms, and our health and safety officer here in Swansea made the recommendation that a trickle of air flowing through a classroom would be sufficient. However, we have different types of buildings in our schools, so we need to take account of the best available ventilation advice that we can source. So on the matter of educational visits, any type of educational visit will need to be risk assessed, including those international visits in light of the traffic light system that we have to obey to. And obviously the risk assessment has to take consideration of any staff members who would supervise children abroad, what would happen if they contracted COVID, and how would those children be supervised abroad if that was the case. So in terms of the partnership work as well, we have written today to all parents and carers in advance of tomorrow's opening, just to convey the expectations we've got in Swansea. So as a parent or carer, parents in Swansea should have received it tonight or at the latest tomorrow morning, but that letter has gone in my name today. So a few changes there. Happy to respond to any questions you've got on those changes.
Thank you very much for that pretty comprehensive report. Any questions from anyone? Could I ask, you mentioned face masks, and secondary schools don't, obviously pupils in secondary schools don't need to use them, but in primary schools they do?
No, that was not a requirement anyway. So the wearing of face coverings for pupils in secondary schools was in place, but that position has changed during the course of the summer holidays and it's no longer a requirement.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Any questions from anyone?
Yeah, please, Lyndon, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Thank you, Helen, for the update. And it's pleasing to see that all effort is being made to avoid disruption for schooling and education, which pupils experienced and teachers experienced last year. Just a couple of points. You made reference towards the end of your comments about the Welsh Government air quality support. And I noticed that Welsh Government are announcing ozone cleaning machines in addition to CO2 machines. Do we know yet how many of those will be allocated to Swansea schools? And is it kind of a bidding process that we have to sort of submit a bid to them for those?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. I haven't seen the detail yet. Just to the best of my knowledge, it's one per school nationally. So there's sufficient resource made available nationally to provide one per school.
Regardless of size of school?
That's all
Yeah.
the detail I've got, Mike,
Okay,
at the
yeah.
moment. Yeah.
Okay, and just a question then. I would imagine that our special schools and pupils with ALN, where there's close physical contact, would require particular attention. And I don't know whether you'd want to go into any detail at this stage, but clearly staff in those areas would need additional support, I guess.
Yes, certainly. I think what the overlay for all of this is that we have a number of control measures still that will remain in all schools regardless. And those control measures then can be escalated or de-escalated according to a particular risk in a particular school. So there may be a higher risk in a special school, for example. So that will need to be considered, and also the local context. So when we say local context, we can mean a school, but we can also mean the local effect within a cluster or an area, a community, or potentially the health board. So there could be a consideration where we're advised by our incident management team, which is a combination of colleagues from education, health, the Public Health Wales, Health Board, obviously working together to determine whether a particular school should escalate the basic control measures. So those control measures of keeping a distance, using the opportunity to learn outdoors where possible, the catch it, bin it principles that we had at the first part of the lockdown, those basic control measures should remain, and then we can escalate or de-escalate according to the local context.
Great, fine, thank you. Robert.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that point really. I think what these guidelines give us is a great deal of flexibility to respond to what's likely to be a changing situation, different circumstances in different schools. And I think that is important, that we build in that flexibility, that we're able to respond as and when required and appropriately. And as Helen says, to minimize the disruption to our schools and to children's learning. And I think we are reaching that right balance.
Great, thanks very much. On the point, Helen, you made about the air cleaning machines, and I think Mike pointed out about, gosh, are they going to be one per school? Because some of our comprehensive schools are quite large. One is not going to be provide much cover, and I think obviously it's something that we possibly need to be pushing for to get more than one in those settings.
Yeah, certainly that size of school does matter, doesn't it? I don't know the technical detail of how these machines work even, so I need to get some more information before I can respond further.
No, that's great. Thanks. I was just making the point. Any other questions on that? Otherwise, we'll move on. And then really an update from on the regional scrutiny moving forward. And Helen, Robert, I don't know which one of you are going to respond on that one.
I think again it's over to you, Helen.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So I've just got a verbal report for you, but I've gathered some more information since our last scrutiny meeting. So I think where we left it, we stated very clearly the 1st of December would not be a light switch moment. Sorry, 1st of September, which is today. We wouldn't have a sudden change of scrutiny arrangements from ERU to a new partnership happening on the 1st. So where we are is that during the course of the autumn term, we expect to take a report to full council in Swansea to make it very clear that we need approval for a new legal agreement. And that new legal agreement will allow the formation of a new formal joint committee for the new partnership. So currently there's a shadow joint committee in operation, but of course it can't make full decisions yet because it hasn't had the approval of each constituent council to be within a formal partnership. So that approval for a new legal agreement is pivotal really. But that new draft legal agreement to date does contain very precise scrutiny arrangement and indeed governance arrangements for the new partnership. So I'll just give you a little bit of context as to where scrutiny sits within the whole governance in the new draft legal agreement. And just to give you some assurance really of the different layers of governance and the interrelationships between the groups. So as I said, that new legal agreement allows a new joint committee to be given delegated responsibilities from each constituent council to be the decision maker in terms of the new partnership. So that joint committee would meet quarterly. And obviously there would be members, including the leaders from each of the councils and the 3 cabinet members for each of those councils, the key members, of course, for the education portfolio. So those meetings would be quarterly. And obviously there would be non-voting observers, non-voting members as well. And the chief executives would be involved and the directors of education, as well as the head of the new partnership. So that's the first layer of governance, the top tier, so to speak. The second one then would be the new partnerships scrutiny councillor group. So very much in the same vein as the current Aero Scrutiny Councillor group operates, there would be a very similar group because that group seemed to function well, and in their last meeting they made it clear that they wanted to continue in a similar vein. So that group, that same theme of working has been incorporated into the new draft legal agreement to ensure that that Scrutiny Councillor group continues, albeit on a smaller scale, with 3 partners involved rather than the current 4. So while we are undertaking a process of transition into a new legal agreement, there has to be a winding down of the current Aero. So the current Aero has a joint committee, and the current Aero will probably, the current joint committee will probably need to meet at least once this term to wind matters down so that the new partnership can be formulated under a sealed legal agreement by each council. So further to the Scrutiny Councillor group in the new partnership, the Education Partnership would also have a strategic group which would feed into the joint committee and could also feed into the Scrutiny Councillors group. And that strategic group would be made up of the head of the new partnership, the 3 directors of education, and also any strategic officers working within the new partnership. And that is also included in the new legal agreement. And further to that, there would be an officers operations group who feed into the strategic group. And the final layer really in terms of ensuring that everybody understands the decision-making process would be the partnership stakeholder group. And that would be made up of 12 head teachers covering primary, secondary, special and pupil referral unit sectors. So we do have in the draft legal agreement a very clear set of governance arrangements. And the scrutiny would, to all intents and purposes, emulate the current Aero arrangements because they have deemed to be successful. So it's anticipated that a report will go to Council in November and that it will be considered corporately first, possibly in October. And the report itself is more or less ready. But we're just waiting for the fine-tuning of that legal agreement. And as you can imagine, getting agreement across 6 partners was difficult. There is a degree of difficulty with 3 partners to ensure that we've got the right wording in the legal agreement. It's a 60-page document. We want to get it right. We don't want to rush things through. And we need to make sure that all the partners are comfortable with the draft before we can actually take it to each of our councils. So that's where we are in terms of transition, but I think it's good news in terms of the new scrutiny group emulating the work of the current Aero scrutiny group.
Right. Thank you very much, Helen. I think the devil's in the detail, as you rightly said. But it's important to get this right at the very start, so that in moving on, there won't be the problems that we've had with the current ERU, really. And I think listening to some of the things you've said, I think you've covered that ground, and that's good news. Are there any other questions on that? If not, can we move on? The work programme. You've all got a copy of the work programme. Our next meeting is on the 30th of September, and it's about school improvement across Swansea, etc. So any questions about that? No? Great. Well, could I thank everybody for attending, and particularly thank Michelle for putting it all together. So thank you all, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you.
Thanks, Lyndon.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Lyndon.
I almost
Bye.
said safe journey home, but I don't think that's really relevant. Yeah.
Take care.